Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's conversation. Here we go. Connect with us on social media. On YouTube, subscribe to our channel at Grade Level Reading. On LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, follow us at Campaign for GLR. And on X, follow us at Reading by Third. Please use the hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to share anything you learned from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to reshare. We encourage you to post any questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Once again, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I'll be helping to produce the webinar behind the scenes. Before we get started, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge our enterprise and our programmatic funders, as well as our individual donors. Your support not only allows us to hold these vital conversations, but also helps us create meaningful opportunities to share insights, foster connections, and build the CGLR community. Thank you. I also want to give special thank you to our Leo sustaining sponsors that you can see on this screen here. We give much thanks to our Leo sustaining sponsors for allowing us to have these weekly conversations that take place on Zoom. And before we jump in, I just wanted to highlight this very special slide that I hope all of you will tune into, highlighting the ways that our momentum continues to build across the CGLR community, with over 350 communities and 46 states and DC, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. We are very, very excited to see the momentum continue to build. You can take a look at more stats on the right side here, and we appreciate you for your engagement, support, and interest in these conversations and in our work. Before we jump in, I just wanted to share a few housekeeping details with all of you. First, oops, sorry, hidden for a second. First, we would love for you to introduce yourself, so please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. When you're responding, be sure to select everyone so that we can all see each other's chat messages, and feel free to share your thoughts and insights throughout the duration of the webinar. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage your engagement by posting questions in the Q&A box. Our attendees will be taking a look at those questions in the Q&A box throughout the webinar, and we'll be typing out responses as we go through, and we will have some dedicated time towards the end of the webinar to respond to those questions live. The conversation is being recorded and live streamed on Facebook. As a reminder, the link to the recording, as well as all slides, bios, and resources, will be sent in a follow-up email to everyone who registered. And lastly, we will be having a brief on-screen poll during Q&A and highly encourage you to respond. That poll helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. Last thing before we begin, I just want to make sure I can call your attention to some of our upcoming webinars that we have through February and the beginning of March. Next week on February 17th, we will have a session on beating the odds with community bright spots that will highlight where smart implementation drives student success. On February 24th, we'll have an exciting conversation on children's savings accounts that will take place at 3 p.m. On March 3rd, we will be having a session on same language subtitling and what we have learned and what comes next. And on the 10th of March, we will have boosting educator capacity to engage with families. So those registration links will be posted in the chat box, and we hope that you can join us. And joining you now to introduce today's conversation is Michelle Hyman with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy.
Thanks, Sierra. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. Our conversation will build directly on a session that we held on July 8th during CGLR's Technology Enhanced Teaching and Learning Institute. During that session, we asked a big question. Why is it important to support learning in the home as many of the systems families rely on, from early childhood to education to health and human services, are continually shifting in today's landscape? In the months since then, that question has grown even more urgent. Pressures across the education system have been intensified, and at the same time, we're seeing clear evidence that learning at home and the relationships that support it are central to children thriving. So what will be different about today's session is that we'll focus on our how. We'll move beyond why family engagement matters to explore what it looks like when families are treated as true partners, how connection between home and school can be designed intentionally, and how tools, especially digital ones, can make that partnership more doable, scalable, and effective. Our goal is to surface practical insights, evidence, and examples that help reframe family engagement from a nice to have to a core strategy for supporting learning where it happens every day. And now I'm excited to introduce today's moderator, Sheetal Singh, Executive Director of the Early Learning Lab at Start Early. Sheetal's bio and the bios of all our panelists will be linked in the chat. And thank you. Sheetal?
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you to the Campaign for Grade Level Reading for bringing us all together for this really cool discussion about creative and innovative ways to support learning at home. I'm very pleased to introduce everyone to our panelists. And as Michelle said, you can find their bios linked in the chat. And I'm just going to start one by one. We have, kicking it off, we have Alejandro Gibez de Gac, who's the CEO and founder of Springboard Collaborative and Paloma. We have Rebecca Honig, Chief Content and Curriculum Officer at Parent Powered. Joan Kelly, founder and CEO of Abound Parenting, and Hee-Jae Lim, founder and CEO of Talking Points. So welcome everyone to this conversation. I'm going to kick it off with a quick question just to get started. So we can kind of think about everything that's changed in the past year. So since last July, when the first part of this conversation happened, a lot has changed and shifted in the education landscape. So what feels meaningfully different and urgent about the role of families in supporting learning at home now? And I'm going to hand it over to Joan to kick us off on this question.
Thanks so much. Nice to be here. So what I would say is really different is that, well, of course, we can't think of families in silos, right? They're part of this larger U.S. landscape that's very, very unsettled, lots of upheaval. We know a lot of funding was, slashed or completely cut for a lot of programs that these kids were part of. We know that being a brown or Black family right now in our country is stressful because of all of the ICE incidents. So we are looking at groups of families in their homes, higher absenteeism, lots of reasons why more learning at home makes sense. And the other thing that I would throw in there is that these families are in such anguish, and maybe the learning at home can be so positive and joyful that it's another satisfying part of their day.
Thank you, Joan. Alejandro, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with all that, and thanks for having me. I would add to that science of reading legislation. There's been an increasing number of states that have passed laws in the category of the science of reading, particularly third grade retention laws that creates a pressure cooker. You can keep a family in the dark for longer than you oughta about how their kid is doing as a reader. That's why we see like the Learning Heroes research that 9 in 10 parents in the country think their kid is reading proficiently. But what you can't keep a parent in the dark about is whether or not their kid is going to fourth grade, right? So that creates these really tense moments within districts that create a powerful incentive for districts to get the family involved in the conversation earlier, if only to get their fingerprints on the challenge and kind of make it an easier conversation to have come fourth grade. So that puts a lot of pressure on the system to engage families earlier and more proactively when it comes to their children's reading proficiency. There's also a number of states, around 20, I think, though someone can fact check me, that have read at home plan requirements as part of that science of reading legislation. So there's a mandate in that state that the district has to give families resources to support literacy at home. Alongside, like also in the vein of the policy landscape, alongside the science of reading legislation, there's also like choice policies and ESAs and vouchers. That's doing a lot to increase parents' purchasing power, which kind of changes the dynamics in the market and in the sector. It also increases competition. Like districts have to fight a lot harder to retain families relative to the other options that families have available to them. The neighborhood school is not as strong a default as it used to be, and so districts have to be more intentional than ever about giving families a reason to stay and about the amenities, the services that they offer to families and the experience that it gives families of their district. So those are just from the policy perspective, a few things that are also materially shifting the landscape.
Got it. Rebecca, how about you? Where are you seeing the urgency?
Yeah, so most immediately, we have seen just even in the past, I want to say like 3 weeks, an uptick in our partners asking for increased home support because they are seeing a major uptick in students who are not coming to school out of fear. So some schools reporting 30%, 50% of their population. So we're seeing this across the board. We serve birth through 12th grade. Our partners asking for increased home support, similar to what we saw during the pandemic. Another thing just to mention, which is very exciting, is that we're also right now seeing, right, as a field, a tremendous body of research coming out on the impact of high dosage relationship based tutoring. And I think it's causing heads to turn to say, how do we get more of that? Right. And so, of course, the natural next step at some point when your mind is wandering in those directions is to look to the home environment and leverage the relationships that exist between parents and caregivers and children. So that's something that's, I think, really exciting about this moment is we're really driving home the value of relationship-based learning.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. EJ, how about you?
Plus one to everything that's been said. Obviously, school districts under a lot of pressure with declining in enrollment, attendance and absenteeism, rates being just so over the roof. Plus, what Rebecca was talking about in terms of immigration issues, really kind of, I think, forcing a lot of kids to spend more time at home, relatively compared to, let's say, 2 years ago. So I think if we have more time at home, what do you do with it, and how you spend that time becomes even more important now than even the last school year. So I think a lot of external factors kind of pointing to this point, including budget constraints and parent choice and a lot of the structural kind of systemic factors driving it too.
Got it. So as education systems across the country are facing uncertainty and strain, where are you all seeing the strongest signals that learning in the home is becoming even more essential? And Rebecca, I'm going to hand it to you first this time.
One thing I'll say is when, if we're looking at district improvement plans, everywhere we are seeing family engagement. I will also say, however, that I think though it makes it into the district improvement plan, sometimes it isn't the first area that is tackled district wide. And so we have a lot of folks reaching out to us saying, we've got this as a goal. We need support in fulfilling this goal in meaningful ways. So it is both, I think, a rising, like we're recognizing it, but also the need for support, I think, is quite large.
Thank you. Alejandro, what are you seeing?
Yeah, the only piece I'd add to that is almost something that we've talked a lot about things that are changing in the current landscape. Something that has always been true, I believe, and will always be true, is that parents are the biggest determinants of their children's life and learning outcomes. Of course we are. When I think about schools serving wealthy communities, like they outperform not because they've got smarter kids or better teachers or better curriculum or better technology. More than anything, it's because parents with privilege confer advantages on their kids hour after hour, day after day, year after year. Those advantages compound over time, and we see the inequities that we do. So, from my perspective, like, unless and until we help all families support learning at home, the achievement gap will persist. Parents are their kids' first and best teachers, and there's general agreement about that. But we haven't given parents the basic things we give every teacher, right? Curriculum and coaching. So to me, that's not new, but it is fundamental, and we kind of have to look at it head on if we want to make a dent on some of the persistent gaps that we've seen.
Got it. EJ, what signals are you seeing?
I think much of what Alejandro and Rebecca said. I do think there is an increasing recognition that families are not the problem, but they are more part of the solution, because we need to look for more solutions to solve the learning gap issues and challenges we're facing, especially based on the kind of the structural factors that we just discussed. So we're definitely seeing more school districts incorporating family school partnerships and family engagement as a core district strategy for driving student outcomes, and families, frankly, becoming more of an important stakeholder in decision making and planning, how you allocate budget. So I think I'm really excited at this new trend that leveraging families is not a goal in of itself, but it's more of, as a lever to get to the outcomes that districts are looking for. And this has not changed really over the last year, but this is all grounded in research and evidence from the field that engaging families can be done effectively and efficiently using digital tools, and at a time when parents frankly have more control than ever to be able to impact that. So I think that control piece has changed over the last couple of years with the new administration.
Yeah. Well, speaking about evidence and what the evidence is showing us, unfortunately, there is a persistent narrative that marginalized families can't effectively support learning at home. But, looking at the evidence, what does the evidence tell us happens when families are equipped and trusted and have the right tools? And can you say a little bit about your work specifically and programs and how this is supporting families? And Hee-Jae, I'm going to start with you. And we have some slides to share too. Right?
Awesome. We can pull up the first slide. So I'm Hee-Jae, everyone, founder and CEO of Talking Points, and we're an education technology nonprofit organization with a mission to unlock the potential of families to fuel their children's learning, especially in underserved communities. And I started this organization more than a decade ago with the belief that by supporting all families engaging in their children's education, ultimately student outcomes can improve. So a little bit about our work. Talking Points platform essentially empowers families and educators by facilitating connections in over 150 languages. I think we can go to the next slide. And also coaching staff on how to build meaningful relationships and scale what works through embedded guidance and actionable data. So we started as a way for schools to reach all families, helping educators and families communicate through two-way messaging, using text messages and mobile apps in their home languages, with kind of industry-leading translations that are contextualized for pre-K to 12 and supported by machine and human translation. And knowing and discovering that most educators do not get specific training on how to talk to families, we also embedded kind of real-time coaching and guidance in the platform to help ensure meaningful engagement between schools and families. So for example, with our message mentor feature, an educator can write a message and ask for essentially best practice edits. And we'll rewrite the message in a positive partnership building tone that we know works and research shows to drive outcomes. And then more recently, with our mission focused on improving student outcomes, we've expanded our platform to essentially provide more specific solutions in the areas of attendance and academics. So on attendance, Talking Point Solution helps kind of build positive, trusting relationships with families to get their students to school every day by sharing personalized nudges, awareness campaigns, and providing the schools the data and information for targeted interventions. And, obviously we know that chronic absenteeism continues to impact student success, and engaging families is a critical intervention to tackle this challenge. And then on academics, research shows that, helping families stay connected to their student learning is key to supporting their learning. And when families, although families want to support, they may not always know how or what exactly to do. So with this, families receive kind of curriculum aligned activities designed to be used at home with their students, and extending and reinforcing learning at home. So the next slide shows kind of the evidence for what we have learned. So an externally kind of validated causal study, this is tier 2 as a tier equivalent in a large urban district showed Talking Points decreased absenteeism rates by 15% in this case, and improved course proficiency rates by about 7% for all students. But I think what's actually more remarkable, to your question, is that we actually saw even greater gains for traditionally underserved students. So Black and Brown students, ELL students, special education students actually saw even higher rates of improvement through this research. And we have several other research studies that show the impact on attendance, academics, and well-being. And to give you kind of a tangible example, we had another large urban school district share that they were seeing high rates of absences and they didn't know why. So Talking Points helped them engage in a two-way dialogue with families about attendance and analyze the data. And ultimately, we surfaced a really powerful insight, which was really around the inefficient transportation system being the single biggest barrier keeping students from school. And this district decided to overhaul the entire bus routing system. And actually, this data-driven decision reduced absenteeism by about 24%, so much larger than what you see on the slide, which is just an example of when you engage families, you can really drive bigger results and really thinking about families as part of the solution as well.
Thanks. Next, I think, Rebecca, we have some slides so you could tell us about Parent Powered.
Great. And word on the street was my volume was a little low. Is it better now? I'm looking like for head shakes. So. Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I am with Parent Powered. We are an evidence-based family engagement program delivered via text message. So we reach families from birth all the way through 12th grade with ways to support learning and development that are aligned with a child's age, grade, or stage of development. We're also shifting our messaging to support the shifting parent-child relationship, right? Because parents and caregivers have different relationship with their child's school at every age and stage. New barriers emerge, new opportunities. So we're really kind of working to connect families with the school in the way that is unique to their specific circumstances, but also the age and stage of their child. We also connect families with critical local resources and supports, and I'll show you a little bit more about that. But we're basically scaffolding family engagement in all ways, connecting families with a whole child curriculum. We have a trauma-informed curriculum, a curriculum for newcomers. And really the idea behind this is that we start with a base and then we engage in co-design with families and partners to make sure that we're reaching families with information and activities that are really going to fit within their lives. The idea is that we want this to be highly doable. And we're happy to find out that it is. So 86% of caregivers report that they do the activities at least once a week. We've conducted several randomized trials and control studies, and we found that students' literacy increases by 2 to 3 months over the course of the school year. And when we personalize the program, those gains double. And I think it's worth unpacking the how of how we reach families, because I think it's really transferable. If we go to the next slide, to all family engagement initiatives. So we reach them 3 times a week right on their phones, as I mentioned, with ways to support learning and development. And on Mondays, we send them a fact message, which orients them around a skill and why it's important to their child's development. So it's basically giving families a what and a why. And we're sending it to them in 160 characters at a 3rd grade reading level, no supplies or materials required. We're really just leveraging the people, places, and things in a family's life and orienting it around pre-existing moments and routines. So the idea is that it is strength-based and that a family is going to glance down at their phone, read the activity quickly, and go, oh, I can do that. Another exciting thing that happens is that we see families sometimes say, I already do that. And you'd think, oh, it's not new information, bummer. But then actually it's the opposite. What happens in those moments is families feel really validated. A lot of what we are sort of promoting in family engagement is families noticing what they are already doing and what is working and building upon that. So on Wednesday, we give families an everyday way to build the skill of the week. And as I mentioned, no materials or supplies required. And this is the how, right? And then we give another how on Friday, which is one more way to build the skill of the week. And we take it a little bit further oftentimes, kind of level it up. If you go to the next slide, I also just wanted to call out that as we're supporting learning and development, we also are ever mindful of families' lived experiences and circumstances, and just want to name the fact that it is incredibly difficult to support learning and development. Not impossible, of course, but it is more challenging when you are struggling to meet your basic needs. So we work with communities to do kind of a resource mapping process so we can identify critical local resources and supports on a range of topics and connect families with those resources and supports.
Thank you, Rebecca. Joan, tell us about Abound Parenting.
Oh, Joan, I think you're muted. Want to make sure we can hear you.
Okay, I'm not seeing my slides, but I'm assuming they're coming. Yes, okay. So I come from a research background. I spent some time in schools teaching and teaching reading in particular, but also teaching classroom elementary. And then I spent over a decade at the Harvard School of Ed. And while I was there, I worked with in a language and literacy lab where we worked with schools across the country. And one of the things that was really clear to me was that we weren't doing enough to help parents help their kids, both not fall through the cracks, but also doing what's really, really important and that research has shown us, which is build oral language skills. The number one reason why middle schoolers and high schoolers don't read successfully has to do with oral language skills and background knowledge. And so we actually have a pretty simple mission at a really low cost, exactly to keep it simple. So if you want to go to the next one, thank you. So it's two-part. The first part is just giving families the way to use rich language at home, because that demands support. You couldn't say to a family, okay, so go home and elevate your language, please. Please just use more rich language. You can tell them to read books, right? Because then you're introducing the language of text into the atmosphere. But mostly the language that's going on at home is, eat your peas, pick up your socks, where's your backpack, what did you do at school, right? So we don't do the kind of sort of rich language building that we know kids need in order to succeed as readers, because they have to build this oral language. And it's a drip, drip, drip process, right? If you get an 8th grader in your class who's low in vocabulary, it is nearly impossible to get them up to the classroom level. If that same child is low in phonics-related skills, we have all sorts of tools to fix that problem. It's not necessarily always easy, but we can do it. The problem with oral language and knowledge building is it has to happen in small moments of conversation back and forth between parents and kids. So what we do is we ask families to ask 2 quick, playful conversations about words and ideas, especially 1 academic word per week. And the academic words we choose are from the Avril Coxhead 2000 research, and the idea being that if we can start to build kids' understanding of these more abstract concepts and words, then over time, they'll not only be more comfortable with the language of text that they encounter in middle school and beyond, they'll also consider themselves word learners. They'll be interested in learning words. And this word consciousness and word awareness is absolutely an indicator of reading comprehension success. So we ask families to ask these 2 questions. You can do it on your way to school and walking, or in the car. You can do it on the bus if you're together. You can do it between bath time and bedtime. It's really, really simple. I'm just going to give you one example because it's really close to my heart as I look out at the snowpack that we've been living with for a long time. One of the questions we do this around a 2-week theme. Our goal is to build up knowledge over time because knowledge building is really important. But also it's just the back and forth conversation. We ask families to do something very simple and natural to them. They don't need any teaching skills to do this. If they can't read it, there's an audio option so they can be read aloud in English and in Spanish. So one of the questions is, for example, we use a shovel to dig in the sand, a shovel to clear snow away, and a shovel when we garden. Why do we use three different shovels most of the time for those three jobs? Why couldn't we just use the same shovel all the time? So what we're trying to do, they aren't yes, no answers. They aren't questions that are going to judge kids. They're not going to be right or wrong. So it's just about sharing ideas and getting them to sort of lift their chin and think about things that aren't right in front of them. It builds brain architecture, and it's just a really important, fun, playful, natural thing to do at home. The books are, we give 2 book suggestions a week with dialogic reading based questions to ask, and additional words that don't necessarily need 7 days of work to be taught. And finally, on the next slide, you'll see that the foundational piece of Abound that really matters to me is what we call our benchmark check-in. And this is designed entirely around, having come from a literacy background, I had to really make sure I knew the family partnership research before this was all going to be designed. And that dual capacity framework, you just can't be, it's so smart, right? I always say, no one would floss their teeth if they didn't know from their dentist that you're going to prevent, gum disease and losing your teeth, right? If we don't teach families what they need to know about why what they're doing is helpful, then we're not motivating them to do it. And we're not elevating them to have the agency that they need to have really good conversations with teachers around their own children's progress. So twice yearly, we ask families to take a 25-question check-in. It's on key benchmarks and family reading and attention background. And then we ask parents to share that with teachers 1 week before the conference. And what ends up happening is families come to the conferences with a much better understanding for what key benchmarks are. Now, we all know there's tons of benchmarks, right? But we only choose some of them based on reading, of course. And the teachers, 95% of the teachers said that they wish every family did it because they come in already knowing when a child is a little bit not on target, and they just come in more prepared for a conference. So it builds capacity and confidence in families of children age 3 to grade 3, but it also then gives them the support to do this drip, drip, drip of skill building with the research base goal in mind of building oral language and knowledge. That's Abound.
Great. Thank you so much, John. And Alejandro, please tell us a little bit about Springboard and Paloma.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I will start just with how I approach this work through my identity as a son, as a parent, and as a teacher. So my life's purpose is helping parents support their kids' learning and success. And in large portion, that's a tribute to my own parents. My family immigrated to the US when I was 7. We ended up in Carrollton, Georgia, where my parents quickly realized that school serving low-income families like mine don't often enough live up to the dream that brought you there. So they got in the driver's seat, they saw a fuller version of my potential and my sister's, and they put us on the path. They helped us overcome the odds, pursue our dreams. My sister went to Columbia, I went to Harvard. We both committed our lives to helping other parents do for their children what our parents had done for us. The disconnect for me growing up is that my parents and teachers were in their own worlds. They were only ever working in isolation rather than in tandem to support our learning. Years later, I became a teacher. I was a bilingual first grade teacher in North Philly. And there I saw that same disconnect. I saw a school system that was still approaching parents too often as liabilities rather than as assets, even though parents are kind of the primary influences in their kids' life and learning. So it was true when I grew up, and unfortunately, it's still true now that parents' love for their kids is the single greatest and most underutilized natural resource in education. So that's kind of the lens that I bring to this work. Springboard Collaborative, which you see up here, is an organization I founded 15 years ago. Springboard runs in-school and out-of-school tutoring programs that enlist parents as teaching partners to improve literacy outcomes. The beating heart of our programs is a weekly workshop that equips parents to teach their kids foundational literacy skills at home. In Title I districts around the country, we get 85% of parents to attend that weekly workshop week after week and gain skills that move the needle on student learning outcomes. We see that on average, our districts can close the gap to grade level reading by more than half, by 54%, in just 5 or 10 weeks. Another way to look at that is that when you look in our districts at the percentage of students that are reading at or above grade level, it increases by 80% over the course of our programs. And that to me is a testament to the fact that parents can be as good as anyone, I'd argue better, at supporting instruction if we equip and enable them to do that. Springboard lives in tier 2, right? It's an intervention for kids who have fallen behind. The question I started to ask myself was, well, what lives in tier 1? Where are the HQIM for parents, right? We're putting a lot of time and energy into equipping teachers with high quality instructional materials, as we should. But parents need those materials every bit as much if they're going to play a daily active role supporting learning at home. So if you bop over to the next slide, I'll walk you through Paloma and what it looks like. So Paloma is a mobile app that helps pre-K to second grade families build a daily habit of tutoring their kids for 15 minutes. Rigorous, curriculum aligned, and joyful instruction daily at home. That's what we're trying to unlock. I know 15 minutes does not sound like much, which is how busy, tired parents like myself can keep up with it. But the minutes add up fast. We're seeing that teachers add up to 1,000 extra hours of one-on-one instruction in just their classroom by helping families to build that small but mighty habit. The hardest part about the whole thing is that humans aren't so great at building habits, whether it's like a New Year's resolution or getting to the gym or engaging daily in your kids' learning. So much of our focus is on habit formation. Like many of the tools that you've seen here, the resources are delivered to families via text message. So every day, families get a text at a time that they've pre-selected. I do Paloma with my daughter Alma before bedtime, so my phone buzzes at 6:45. It initiates our routine. You click the link, no password, no download, no login, really trying to minimize friction to maximize access. And for that same reason, families receive all the guidance in their home language. I speak Spanish to my daughters. All of Paloma's guidance to me is in Spanish, even though I'm teaching Alma letter sounds in English. Every day, same 3 building blocks: I do, we do, you do. I do is a short video, 30 seconds, explaining to the family, hey, here's what your kid is learning in school, and here's how you can reinforce those foundational skills at home. We map the parents' scope and sequence to the district core curriculum so that there's coherence between, what, when, and how is a kid learning the R-controlled vowel via their CKLA in the classroom, and then as a family, what the heck is an R-controlled vowel, and how can I reinforce that in a meaningful way at home? After I do comes we do. You practice together. The parents practice the skills and there's scaffolding built in. So even if you're a caregiver who's learning to read alongside your child, you're still equipped to be able to confidently and effectively support their growth at home. And then every day ends with independent practice, with a child getting the opportunity via a decodable book or a math story problem to further practice a skill they've been working on while still getting coaching and support from their family. And we provide coaching tips for the caregiver to know, what kinds of questions should I be asking? What do I do if we get stuck? It's like, how can I be an effective instructional coach in this experience? So if you click over to the next slide, when families finish their lesson on Monday, Paloma asks what they want that week's special story to be about. And families will choose like whatever topic is bringing their child joy. We run like limited story themes. So this one's Shark Week. We did Snow Day recently. We've got basketball coming up for March Madness. But any topic that's bringing a kid joy, they'll choose it, and we will personalize the decodable for them on that topic. The trick is you have to complete your 3rd tutoring session of the week to unlock the story. That's what drives so much of the consistency we see. Like your kid will not let you forget. You still complete your full tutoring session. You still do the I do, you still do the we do. But if on Monday, my daughter Alma says, I really want the shark story this week, then if you click over to the next slide, you'll see that her wish is our command. The decodable books are personalized to kids' learning needs and interests. We also visually render kids as protagonists in their own stories. In the onboarding process, they choose their avatar so that they get to have the joyful and powerful experience of seeing themselves in their books. If you move to the next slide, we'll start talking about the outcomes. So last year across all our partners, and they're all Title I districts like New York City Public Schools, LAUSD, Metro Nashville, Guilford County, Jackson, Mississippi, 76% of all K2 families successfully tutored their kids using the tool, and 70% of participating families tutored their kid at least 3 times per week and sustained that habit the whole year long. The reason we care about that habit so much is that it unlocks this world of instructional time that just lays dormant beneath the surface otherwise. So on average, teachers saw families in their classroom do 14 hours of one-on-one instruction every single week. There's the force multiplier, right? As a teacher, you could do that by yourself if you hang out for 2, 3 hours a day after school and tutor kids individually. Much more sustainable to unlock that time in partnership with families. Last slide, I promise. More learning time, better learning outcomes. This is the most important piece of the whole thing. So a study showed that families using the tool helped their kids make 64% more reading growth than a matched control group. Multilingual learners almost doubled their progress, and students starting below grade level more than doubled their progress. One district also did a study to look at whether the tool could help reduce their declining enrollment. The theory being if families feel more plugged in, if they feel like they've got visibility and agency in their kids' learning, are they less likely to walk out the door? They were hoping to see a 1% reduction in their withdrawal rate. They saw a 52% reduction in their declining enrollment. And to me, the lesson in all of this is that if you take any outcome we care about, whether it's an academic outcome, attendance, enrollment, and if you follow it far enough upstream, you get to a parent that's influencing it directly. That's where the leverage is. And that's why all of us feel so passionately about equipping families to kind of take the intention that they have to support their kid and turn that into a lasting practice.
Great. Thank you so much, Alejandro, and everyone for sharing about your solutions. So I think each of your solutions really challenges this myth that I had mentioned previously, that families with fewer resources lack the capacity or the commitment to support learning at home. So as you think about your families, your users, and you're looking at their progress and growth, please share with us any patterns or insights you're seeing about what happens when families are given clear, actionable ways to support learning at home. And, even more exciting, what does this say about our existing systems and the way we design supports going forward? Alejandro, I know you're just catching your breath, but we're going to hand it back over to you to answer this one first.
It's such a good question. I'm happy to kick it off. I think when it comes to parents, there tends to be a deficit mindset, and you alluded to this earlier. At worst, people think that parents don't care. At best, some folks think that the parents are just too busy. But neither of those is true. And I say that as a parent that feels too busy. The challenge is how do you help families turn that deep intrinsic intention that they have to support their kid into a practice. What am I doing about that on Tuesday night? How do you turn a practice into a habit? Are we doing this consistently? Is it a part of our routines now? And then how do you turn the habit into an identity? Have we internalized this this is how we move through the world as a family? We're a family that sets and achieves goals together. We feel agency in our trajectory through the education system. None of those leaps happen by themselves, but all of them can be scaffolded. And those are problems that have largely been solved by behavioral science. And there's other sectors that tend to apply those learnings better than we have in education. Sectors like healthcare and fitness, and much to everyone's chagrin, social media. We can take those same lessons and apply them in the context of helping families to build a daily routine. And we see that in the engagement that Talking Points gets, that Abound gets, that the Parent Powered gets, that the 85% of families turning out week after week at Springboard's workshops. Palom's retention is greater than Duolingo or Roblox or Candy Crush. You can build tools that are super retentive and super engaging. and it doesn't happen by itself. My guidance and kind of my encouragement to school systems is to weave families into the core academic strategies and into the MTSS plan and strategy within any district. The challenge happens if you've got teaching and learning over here and family and community engagement over there, and you structure silos within your org chart. What you're going to get is a siloed experience for kids and families where the two never come together when in fact teaching and learning and family engagement ought to be two sides of the same coin. So thinking really intentionally about in your tier one, like as a district, do all your teachers have curriculum? Do all your parents have daily guidance to support learning at home? Are they getting better than just kind of a reading log and a random homework packet? Within the tier two, like are the students who need more intensive support receiving that support? And what role do parents play in providing that support to their families? How are they equally integrated into that? And the same applies for tier three. I won't go on, but that would be kind of my wish structurally within districts to help enable some of the kind of changes that we've been talking about.
Right. Well, thank you, Alejandro. I love that kind of thinking about fostering habits and how habits turn into identity, and also breaking down those silos between teaching and learning and family engagement. For all of you, so much of the work that you're doing does focus on taking research and turning it into concrete everyday actions for families. How does your approach help move families from telling them that they matter to really showing them how to engage in ways that really do fit their lives, their real lives? And Joan, I'm going to ask you to start this time.
Okay. So as I said before, I come from a research background. I wasn't interested necessarily in doing something with families. I'm interested in solving a reading problem. And the reading problem has to do with oral language and background knowledge. I know that we've talked ad nauseum in our country about phonics. And let me just say, every school should have a systematic phonics program built in. That's 20 to 30 minutes a day, period. We don't want to spend too much time on phonics unless the child needs the support. And then, yeah, you need that intensive tutoring, and you need to do the kinds of things that are going to give kids the practice that they need to become automatic, because automaticity is so essential. But the research that's driving my work has everything to do with oral language. And so the question is, how can we get families to engage in this? And so I just tell them about the research. I do a workshop before we launch that gives families what I call well, there are 3 buckets of skills. And what we're trying to do is a caregiver's view of the science of reading. I've taught thousands of teachers about the science of reading. Parents can handle it too. It's really not rocket science, right? There are things that we need in every school. We need a systematic phonics program, and we need a lot of content-rich curricula that's constantly used. But we also know all sorts of data about what a rich language setting does for a child, right? We know that when kindergartners have teachers who both have like a richer quality of language, then those kindergartners are going to do better in their reading comprehension. What kids are steeped in, the language they sit in all day, matters. So the question is, if that's the case, and we can't help parents do that better, then we're not supporting families the way they need to be supported to make sure that their kids read well. And it is a dosage problem. The research shows us that it's a dosage problem for kids, right? So we want families to engage in this process of building rich language in their lives. So the way we do it is we teach them about that. We teach them how important it is. We get them as best we can. And as Alejandro said, it's not easy to engage families. None of us should pretend it is. It's very difficult. Part of the problem is their lack of awareness. My own lack of awareness before I was doing this kind of work, their lack of awareness of where their kids are. When 92% of families believe their kids read at or above grade level, as Learning Heroes tells us, I mean, why would they ever be motivated to do anything at home, right? We have to be motivated by the facts and by clarity. So what we want to do, I think every school, if I were a principal in a school right now, I'd want to make sure that every adult who walks through the halls of that school has an understanding of what the basic skills are that kids need to read well, like the buckets of skills kids need to read well, and also what their role is in that learning to read process. And if we can give families the understanding of what their role is and make it clear and easy to support, then we've done our part in creating these concrete, everyday, actionable things for them to do that feel meaningful. And it's a lot about meaningfulness.
Got it. Thank you, Joan. That was wonderful. Hijay, I want to give you a chance to answer this question too.
Yeah, I know that there's been several mentions of the dual capacity building framework at the webinar in the chat, and we really design the Talking Points platform around that principle. And then how do we use, think about how do we use technology to bring that alive? And literally what that dual capacity building means is that we got to build the capacity of school systems and the capacity of the families in tandem to partner together. So in terms of how we think about this and address it, we believe that it's very important for schools to meet and welcome the families where they are by truly treating them as partners in their school learning. So, for example, we suggest a first step when schools come on board to show families that they matter through kind of nudging the school administrators and educators to model it by sending a welcoming message that's personalized in a positive way in their home languages, just to start that dialogue and start building that relationships and asking questions about their children that then brings the information back into the classroom that could be helpful for any instruction or classroom management. So that's an example of building capacity on the school side. And then for families, I think you asked about real life, Chital. We assume that real life means that families don't necessarily have the time to go to school physically, attend a workshop or a literacy night, or have that much time on their hands, even frankly at home, or have any resources other than normal household goods at home. So we know that, timely nudges to families to build their capacity up, like sentence starters and prompting what questions to ask their school about their children's progress, or letting the families know about that one thing that they could do that day, cutting through all the noise and the additional information that could make a difference in their students' learning. I think that goes a long way. So, through all this, I think by building up the capacity, we feel like families can feel more empowered to show up and kind of engage in ways that fit the various constraints and just numerous barriers of life that they have to navigate, in addition to supporting their children's learning.
Of course. Thank you, Hijay. So let's talk about joy. Many of you, or all of you, have emphasized the importance of playful learning and strengths-based approaches, especially when we're talking about early literacy. So how does your solution help families, support learning in ways that do feel joyful? Rebecca, I'm going to go to you for this one.
All right. Yeah. Oh, what a good one to get. So, I mean, first of all, everything we do is rooted in relationships, right? And that's where the joy is going to come from. And literacy is a joy factory. Like when we talk specifically about literacy, every single one of those pillars of the science of reading is the source of so much joy. And I want to dig into how phonics is also the source of so much joy, but I'll do that in a second. So the first thing I'll say is like our messages are delivered via text message, but that's kind of the extent of the tech interface. Really what happens next is you get down at eye level and you start engaging, right? Whether you're telling stories or asking questions or playing a rhyming game or making things using the stuff around you. So we really root our experiences in that relationship. We also focus a lot on building the conversation skills and active listening skills that are going to allow a parent to really connect with their child. We get the most positive feedback on activities that encourage the child to express their thoughts and ideas. Parents and caregivers are like, oh my gosh, you got to know this thing my kid said, right? So it's joyful for parents as well. And we really model play. So we, during the pandemic, did live family workshops. We had a cast of characters. We were all about really promoting child-led learning so that parents were and caregivers were being responsive to, their child's imagination and ideas and the way in which they were exploring the world. So I would say like that's number one. But another thing just to surface in terms of joy, what we found on those family workshops actually is that we ended with a Q&A. And oftentimes parents and caregivers were saying, well, I want to read to my child, but they can't sit through a story, or they make a lot of noise, or they get frustrated, and so that was like a record scratch moment because it was like, wait a minute, there's foundational developmental understanding we want to build, so parents can say, oh my gosh, that's normal. Like we want to support them in knowing what literacy looks like at every age and stage, so that they have realistic expectations and that they can see some behaviors that they might think of as challenging as actually part of their child's learning and development. So that helps bring the joy because it lowers the parental frustration, right? They're like, oh my gosh, this is actually exactly what's supposed to be happening. The other thing, though, that we want to make sure we do is like lift up the 5 pillars of the science of reading and expose the bedrock of foundational skills like self-regulation and executive function, right? Because those are the skills that allow a parent or caregiver to joyfully engage with their child, right? So that if we can give a parent or caregiver the suggestion, like before you read, like do something physical, or as you're reading, encourage your child to get up and act out the story, right? We are meeting that child where they're at in terms of their development, and we're deepening the experience with a book. We're increasing joy all through really focusing on these other skills that are going to allow a child to focus and engage or be themselves and have that be tolerated and celebrated by their parent or caregiver. And then, there was one more thing I was so excited. Oh, phonics, right. Okay, so I just have to say, right, we're talking about joy. And we know that phonics is critical, that especially for children who are struggling, direct concept, systematic, multi-sensory instruction is the way to go. And everybody's like, oh, phonics, no. But it is actually, it's like a workout, right? It's like when you're doing direct concept systematic instruction, that's multi-sensory, you're repeating the same things every day, right? So it becomes a habit. And so parents and caregivers, they can learn that sequence, but B, so much of it is physical. It can be rooted in games. It can be rooted in play. And so it's like moving your muscles. And I think really leveraging that and trusting that parents and caregivers, and Alejandro, you can speak to this as well because you do a lot of this work, they can pull it off. They can pull off direct concept systematic instruction and make it joyful. And that's really exciting because especially for children who are struggling, that's oftentimes an area where they need a lot of support. Okay, I'll stop.
Got it, Rebecca. That was wonderful. I've never really thought about phonics and joy the same way, but now I will look at it differently. I want to stick with you though. Just you mentioned kind of bedrock and foundational skills, but then we know that families have a lot of needs, and I'm wondering how you think about scaffolding learning through the other supports that families need, such as, food and shelter and other basic needs as well.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you mentioned this. This is absolutely critical. I think back to work I was doing with a resettlement agency with a family who were newcomers. I was the education lead tasked with orienting them around their child's school curriculum and how they would be supporting that at home. My first meeting in the home, we were going over the learning goals, and the father stopped me and he said, actually, can you help me fix up my resume? Like if I don't get a job, I can't put the kids on the school bus in the morning, right? I need to know my schedule. I need a job. And so and this is, of course, right? as a parent or caregiver, your primary concern is the survival and well-being of your family at the most basic level. And so we need to make sure we are addressing critical needs and supports. And so some advice in that department, right? We do a lot of this work with schools and districts, helping them identify their local resources and supports, not just their deficit needs-based supports, but also what are the supports that are going to lift a family up, connect them to their community, right? Exponential gains come from that, because when you get hooked into the community, you learn about new supports and you have that protective factor, right? Knowing your supports is so critical, because oftentimes I think what happens is a family gets referred to a local support, health clinic, a pediatrician, food pantry. If that referral is not productive, they stop trusting their local systems. And when that happens again and again and again, we see families get disenfranchised from those systems. So I would say really forming that network of relationships with your community-based organizations, so that you not only know what they offer, but you know how they work. And we want to get as intimate as we can. If there is like, Susan is in the office on Wednesday and she is the one who knows what's what, we want to tell the family, call on Wednesday and ask to speak to Susan, right? We want to know the workarounds. We want to know how to productively connect families with resources, which means we want to follow up with them afterwards to find out, like, did it work? Do you have other advice for families who are reaching out to that same resource? I think something schools and districts can do, a lot of times community-based organizations, they need space, right? They're small, they're like fighting for funding. Like if you've got a gym, like give it over to them to host a resource fair or to have a family meeting, right? If you can start making your school or district a place where your community-based organizations feel comfortable, that can be really wonderful. Also, really learning from families about where they're finding support within their communities and encouraging them to share that with others. You'll start to notice, right? Oh, that parent, they're out there talking to everyone, right? Like make sure you are that parent. If you've got a resource list of all the great resources that connect families with critical supports, make sure schedule a meeting with that parent and give them that resource list, buy them lunch, and talk to them about connecting families to those supports, because those evangelists are in your community, and the more they know about how to connect families with critical local resources and supports, the better able they'll be at getting families hooked up with those. Yeah.
Thank you, Rebecca. And as you talk about working within communities, one of the things we think about for all of these tools is scale, right? Wanting to reach every family, not just a few. So what does this look like? How can solutions be scaled in a way that is feasible across communities? Alejandro, I'm going to go to you first for this one.
Yeah, totally. I have two thoughts that come to mind. One around like alignment, kind of coherence, and one around affordability, because affordability is a necessary ingredient for scale. On the alignment topic, like I think that there's been a lot of conversation and focus around coherence, and it's mostly focused on creating alignment kind of across the interventions at the time that kids spend at school, and that is important work. Let's do that work. I think that the challenge is that kids only spend 13% of their waking hours there. So the question for me is like, how do we create coherence, not just in like what's going on during the school day, but also how do we create coherence across the continuum of home and school, so that parents and teachers rather are part of a coherent teaching team together. That's where I think that there's a lot of interesting questions around curricular alignment in order to create that cohesive unit, sun up to sundown. The other piece I think about as it relates to scale is affordability, because district budgets are in varying degrees of distress. One-on-one instruction is highly effective. We know this to be true, but it's typically prohibitively expensive, right? Like most people on the face of the planet are going to charge you $50 an hour to spend time with students. As parents, we spend time with our children for the love of the game. Would be nice, but if somebody paid for that. But we're doing it from a place of deep intrinsic motivation. So where I gain optimism is like if we can turn some of that time into instructional time, then we can get all the benefits of one-on-one instruction without the same costs that make it cost prohibitive as a scalable solution. but without kind of sacrificing the relational aspect by just kind of automating away the tutor via AI or potentially a different approach. I think so much of the science of reading hinges on kids getting this kind of hundreds of at-bats, so they crystallize that grapheme kind of phoneme connection. Hard to pull off in the classroom setting. But if we can equip families to do that at home, then that problem starts to feel a lot more solvable in a way that's more inexpensive by like orders of magnitude than any other way to get kids access to one-on-one instructional time.
Got it. And as you mentioned, relational, especially in the context of technology, we hear a lot about digital communication. We hear less about digital connection. What is the difference? Hijay, can you help us understand that?
Sure. I think a helpful way to think about the difference is kind of similar to involving versus engaging family. So, digital communication supports family involvement. It's primarily like one way, meaning that the information sharing is unidirectional from school systems to families and focusing on really sharing information from school to families. No, that's really it. Whereas digital connection, on the other hand, I think is the kind of the foundation to effective family school partnerships. It's two-way, it's relational, it's trust building, and it's grounded in listening and interaction with families. Asking, and involvement is asking families to stay informed, whereas engagement really invites families to partner, respond, and co-create that learning experience. So I think about kind of an attendance example. When you're thinking about digital communication, that might include a one-way notification from school. I'm sure many of you have got this from your kid's school that the student was absent that day. It comes with a no reply, like do not reply to the message. We're just telling you this. Whereas, with digital connection, it's about sending a personalized note for the family member that builds trust. Ask why that student might be absent so you can actually get to the root cause and the reason so that you can problem solve that together. So I think you can see that going back to kind of effective family school partnerships and dual capacity, it really requires that digital connection, and the shift matters because, involving families, it should not be a unidirectional thing. It should be a bidirectional relationship building imperative. And I think about how digital is implemented is also critical. Simply using digital tools doesn't create necessarily connection or engagement. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. And I think impact really comes from that deliberate progression of relationship building to get the results as well.
Got it. Yes. We broadcast doesn't always build connection. We have time for just one last question before we move take some questions from the audience. So I'm gonna say I think despite everything we've heard and what we know, all too often I think family engagement is still seen as a nice to have. And so I'm hoping that every one of you can share a story or an example of how a strong family partnership and trusted relationships there can really move the needle. So I'm going to ask Joan to start with this one, if you can, and then we'll all go around.
Okay, I'm going to talk really fast because I actually had one thing to say in response to something that was said earlier. But in short, last night I was on a workshop with some California school, and one of the parents mentioned that what was happening at home with her child who has struggles with a sort of complex series of issues, that she's been trying to work on phonics with him, and it really was kind of boring for him. But she noticed that when she did rhyming with him, or that when she read to him, or when they shared a book together, that it really made a difference. And when she asks him questions and he answers them, that really made a difference. And she was feeling bad about the school having asked her to do something that she didn't feel like was really helping the child. So that just made me really aware of the fact that we have to remember that these are parents and not teachers. We have to remember that we don't want to shift the burden that teachers have onto parents. I walked into one district recently that has given parents 8 apps this year. It's too much. So we also just need to put, and the last thing I'll say, we need to put our economist hat. Noni Lasso always said that. Remember, parents have very little time with kids. What is it as a school that we want our families to do at home? And really think that through before you proceed with in any direction.
Thanks. Rebecca, I'm going to hand it to you next.
So I'm thinking back to many years ago, a parent shared with us that she didn't support her child's reading at home, specifically did not read to her child because she and her husband both felt that they weren't strong readers and they didn't want it to rub off on him. After receiving support that year around knowing that learning how reading happens and learning that so much of what she was already doing was supporting reading, learning that it's okay to make mistakes when you read. It is okay to read by describing what you see in the pictures, that it is your voice that makes books special and your connection with your child, right? After getting that encouragement and information and everyday ways to support learning that really worked for her, she saw herself as an empowered reading partner. She went on to serve as one of our advisors for our program development. And now her experiences have informed the activities that go out to parents all across the country. And so I can't think of a better example of the importance of supporting families, meeting them where they're at, and really taking a strength-based approach, and believing that all families absolutely have what it takes to support their child's learning and development.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. That's lovely. Hee-Jae, how about you?
We've recently heard from an elementary school principal who shared that she had a kindergartner who had missed, I think, about 19 days of school, which is about 4 weeks of instructional time in the first 2 months of the year. And when our platform kind of nudged the student's teacher to consistently follow up and send more of like a suggested personalized message to the family saying, we miss having the student's name at school, and this is what was missed and why that matters. And all of this is kind of research-based communication and awareness. The mother, replies sharing that she works nights and has trouble getting up in the morning to wake the child up in time for school. So then the principal and the teacher was then able to arrange transportation for the child to get to school more consistently. And I think this is just an example, a very simple example, but of how really partnering with families to share that information and understanding the home circumstances and opening those positive lines of trusted communication between families and schools can lead to insights that are easily resolved once you have those insights. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you, Hee-Jae. Alejandro, how about you? A story.
Yeah, I love the strengths-based approach that everyone's taking. A lot of my work is about helping districts and states kind of take a similar approach. And I know I'm preaching to the choir in this context, but sometimes it's helpful to kind of use this thought experiment. So I often ask folks to imagine if they could flip a switch and have a tutor for every kid. Imagine if that tutor were willing to tutor students at high dosage. Imagine if they use curriculum aligned, personalized, culturally affirming resources to tutor kids at home. These tutors that we're imagining, we don't have to manage them any more than we do like AI robo-tutors. But unlike chatbots, imagine that these tutors have deep relationships with students. They share their cultures and identities, and they do the tutoring entirely in person. Imagine if all that tutoring cost $2 an hour. Show me a district, show me a state that wouldn't wish that for their students. What moves me about the thought experiment is that those tutors are already in every school and in every district. Parents are the tutors hiding in plain sight. We just need to equip them and support them in doing that work.
Great. Thank you, Alejandro. So now we're at time to take questions from the audience. So we have some good questions in our Q&A box. Please, keep popping the questions in there. I'm going to start with some of these that are coming through. There are a lot of questions about funding for these tools. And one of our audience members asks, do any of our panelists have experience or advice in helping smaller rural districts find creative ways to pay for some of these platforms? They all sound so wonderful. I just know that we're going to be greeted with, there's no money for that. Does anyone have an answer? Joan?
All I was going to say is our model is supposed to work for all schools. And in order to do that, we charge a really, really, really low price. So for $500, families get access to Abound and teachers get access to Abound, bus drivers, after school providers, summer, anyone who wants to, because we want to get every adult in a child's life able to do this rich language building with the child. So what we've found is when it's such a small amount, it's fairly easy to get those small grants. Rural schools may have more of a problem with it, but when you know you're giving some tool to so many people, everyone in your community for short money, it helps.
Great. Anyone else? Okay.
I think similarly, kind of the cost of talking points is around $5 to $10 per student for the school year. So it's not, insignificant, but compared to many other programs out there, it's pretty cost effective. And as a nonprofit, we do partner with local philanthropy to often find funding to subsidize or kind of pay for programs in those school districts, as well as look for creative ways of kind of coupling together funding that might be not used. So,
And the only piece I'd add to that is, oh, go ahead. After you.
I wanted to echo that. And similarly, our solution is just it's like $6 or $7. I had to do the 6 or 7. My children would be cringing right now. Per family per year. And a lot of it, I live in a rural community. We oftentimes will partner with a local community-based organization like a United Way to pass that funding along to schools and districts. And I think especially in rural communities where those relationships are in place, that can be a really effective way to seek funding, is those partnerships.
Go ahead.
I was going to move on just because we do have more questions, and this one struck me as interesting. Someone wants to know, how does the environment or nature play into parent engagement initiatives? Where do the outdoors come in for the embodied learning that children need? Any thoughts about that?
I'm just going to say, I think it's a really great question. And no, I do. I think that, doing anything in the outdoors and with nature makes such a huge difference. In our daily questions, we often ask families to, do things that are outdoors. But anything that anyone can do to encourage that. What do they say? That kids learn better when they're either outdoors or in the dark, something crazy like that. So I just think it's a great question. I wish we did more of it, and I'm hoping to do even more of it, but we do try to engage that way as often as we can.
The only piece I'd add is that one thing that I think is true of all of our tools is that they're designed explicitly not to feel like screen time. It's not more of like, kid behind a screen, headphones in, off in their own universe. They're designed to create interactions between caregivers and their children, interactions where people are looking at each other and relating and connecting, and the technology is there to equip the caregiver to have these instructional moments with their children. But the moments themselves are deeply personal. They can be inside, they can be outside, they can be on the go. And I think that's a common approach that we all take. How can we, without sacrificing rigor, how can we have joy in equal measure and help families create these memories, lasting memories by virtue of the learning that they engage in together?
A lot of our activities take place outdoors. And one thing I'll say is we discovered in a lot of our co-design that sometimes families were actually uncomfortable getting hands-on outdoors, especially if it was messy. So we actually started recommending also, just to scaffold that, bringing the outdoors inside, like bringing a cookie tray out and putting some pine cones or some soil there and bringing it in, and just having some more contained, or on a porch, having more contained activities to start getting comfortable, especially if a child has maybe some sensory challenges. So that's one way too. We also try to scaffold those experiences because we know not everybody's comfortable rolling up their sleeves. And it's, I feel like outdoor learning is also a wonderful opportunity for co-design with families. Everyone has different outdoor environments, whether you're in an urban setting or a rural setting. And so we want to help everyone find the outdoors. And that's a wonderful opportunity to really ask your parents, like, where are they going, and root your activities in those places.
Got it. Before we go to the next question, I just want to call attention. There's a poll that should have popped up on your window. So for all of our audience members, please just take a couple of minutes, or even less than a minute, to fill out this engagement poll, because it really helps us tailor these conversations to your needs. We had a question that speaks to my particular area of interest, which is examples. What are some examples of successfully engaging, or strategies to successfully engage parents of the littlest learners? So in the 0 to 5 age, to better get better get kids prepared for kindergarten. Does anyone have an answer that they could share on that?
I could.
Sure, Joan. Thanks.
So we start at age 3, mostly because we had initially decided we'd start at 0, but a lot of our family interviews showed that parents aren't really as keyed into some of these reading-based challenges, or opportunities at the earlier years, during the earlier years. But of course, oral language is such a huge part of the early experience for kids and adults. And so we start there at age 3, and we'll someday go back down to birth, because it's really important for families to understand the importance of connecting through language for kids. I mean, it's just undisputable. But we do start at age 3 with the pre-K set.
We start at birth, and I'll say we work a lot in the very, very earliest years about, cueing into your infant, right? And doing a lot of language-based, music-based kind of cue following. So narrating your daily actions and activities, responding to your child's cues with, building on them with your own language. When we start getting older into like the toddler years, we find it's really effective to link learning to family struggles in ways that will make those struggles easier. So whether it's a rhyme that you can say while your child's putting on their shoes, or a game you can play while you're at the grocery store, or a calm down strategy that also involves letter sounds, just can be a wonderful way to kind of add in that secondary gain that everybody's looking for in those earlier years, and always linking the learning to a daily moment or routine. As Alejandra was saying, like, it builds it as a habit, but it also makes it doable on the go. So those are some of the strategies we use in those very early years.
Okay. Well, I think we can move on to our lightning round, which is where I'm going to pick a question and give everyone 30 to 60 seconds to answer, just so we can wrap up our conversation. And I'm going to ask, if education systems were designed around the reality that learning happens everywhere, and especially at home, what would look different from the way that they're designed now? And let's see, can I have a volunteer to go first? I don't want to, I can pick.
I can go.
Go ahead.
I think we'd stop treating families as an add-on or a nice to have. You mentioned this, Tal, and many of us have, and start designing with families like as kind of core learning partners, and reframe the mindset that learning happens everywhere and not just in the classrooms, which is the minority of the time. And schools would share goals, what the students are working towards, how progress is measured, and also how families can reinforce learning in like small, realistic ways at home that does not overburden them as necessarily teachers, or kind of substituting the work that instructional kind of instructionally kind of trained professionals should do at school. I think we'd also design for access and really prioritize that accessibility and action for families, that are connected to real outcomes like attendance and literacy, many of which we discussed here. And I think, yeah, the biggest shift would be that learning wouldn't stop at dismissal, like that the system would reflect how learning actually works, which is really everywhere, truly, in classrooms, in homes, in communities, outdoors, and design the classroom experience to reflect that.
Right. Alejandra.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I think if education systems were truly designed to equitably support families in reinforcing learning at home, I don't think the achievement gap would exist, not nearly in the same way that we see it. That to me is the key lever that as a sector we haven't collectively all pulled together. And how that would play out in a kid's life is like that they've got the foundational skills to be able to avail themselves fully of their life opportunities. How it would play out in a parent's life is that like parenting feels just a little bit more winnable, sustainable, less confusing, more guided, more supported, as it oughta. And for a teacher, same thing, that the job finally feels like a little bit more winnable. And it's not just kind of luck of the draw, where, if you're in a wealthy district, you stand on the shoulders of parents and call yourself tall. And if you're in a low income district, you're left to wonder, how am I ever going to pull this off, right? Like, everyone needs each other in order to reach this goal that they have in common of helping kids succeed and thrive. If we build our education system around that, then I think we solve a lot of the challenges that have been plaguing us for a while.
Okay. Joan, how about you?
Yeah, I
Thank you.
totally agree with you, both. I would just add that if we could get all of the staff members in a school to sit down and have a real conversation about engaging families, what do they do personally? A lot of what happens with family engagement is one teacher to one parent. A parent asks for something, there's not enough of systems level sort of planning around what happens. So that means that sometimes families just get a ton of resources that they don't really want. It really does make sense to have a school-wide plan for family engagement, and then to prioritize what you think is the most important thing that you need families' help with, because it is all in this together. It does take a village, whether people want it to or not. And I work in some, really impoverished areas and also some really high-end areas. And I have to say, a lot of those high-end families are no more aware of what their kids should be doing and how to help them. So they have other, of course, big advantages, but they don't know.
Great. Thank you, Joan. Rebecca, how about you?
That's a great question. I feel like we would have parents at every table and we would be working really hard to make that happen. So everything from being extremely inclusive in how we show up as schools and making sure that our parents and caregivers are represented in every inch of our school buildings, from what's on the walls to like what's playing over the loudspeaker to the books that children have access to on the shelves, right? They would see themselves, and we would work really hard to shift a narrative that has existed for a long time for many families, that school is not a place for them. So I think we would be very intentional about shifting that narrative. And we would also be creating joyful experiences for families to form communities amongst themselves, right? So that it could grow and expand beyond our schools into our communities.
Right. Well, thank you so much to all of you for sharing with us, this audience, about your solutions, but not just your solutions, but also what you've been learning as you've been co-designing and implementing your solutions in districts all across the country. It's really inspiring to hear about, the creative thinking, the innovation, really figuring out new ways to use technology to engage families and make sure that learning is supported at home. So thank you so much for taking the time. I'm going to hand it back to Michelle to close us out.
Thanks so much, Sheetal. And I just want to thank you, our moderator, Sheetal Singh, for guiding us in such a thoughtful and grounded conversation. And to each of our panelists again for sharing both your evidence and your practical insight from your work. I think today's discussion really helped reinforce that when families are equipped, trusted, and connected, learning doesn't just happen in classrooms, it happens everywhere. I think that's a message that we all share today. And at a time when the education system is ever shifting, family partnership really stands out as one of the most promising, scalable, and hopeful levers that we have. So I hope that you will all join us again for more of our upcoming events. I think there's going to be a slide that pops up that shows some of those. And then on the behalf of the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, thank you again for your work and dedication to our children, families, and communities. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time.